Welcome to Faith, Fiction, and Folklore, or as we like to call it, the Tri-F Podcast, where we try not to mess the podcast up. And today, we are talking about Freemasons. Now, the Freemasons are kind of a weird thing because there are some people that are like, they control everything. Yeah. And, you know, a lot of this, I kind of like the Freemason theory myself because basically it does a good job explaining how the conspiracy theory stuff kind of ties together because, you know, the CIA may call it a conspiracy theory, but really what it is it's a good old boys club.
Yeah.
It's just a bunch of old guys wearing silly clothes, doing pageantry, you know, to feel like they have secrets when they're really just trust fund kids with lots of time and too much money. So I particularly like the Freemason thing. And I don't know if we'll actually come across this part in the videos tonight, but Bill Schneblin is the guy we're going to be watching. He was into the Freemason thing for a while, and he has a wonderful line. I don't know if we'll come across it whenever we watch this video or not, but in case we don't, I'll just lead with it. He said, the thing that killed the Freemasons was television. Because apparently when people can watch TV and do stuff on the weekend, nobody wants to go out and walk around in funny garments. So, now I should be fair, you know, the Freemasons do some nice stuff. You know, when I had appendicitis at 6, the Shriners actually paid for my surgery. Mm-hmm. So there was that. But, you know, a lot of it's not all good. And a lot of this also ties into the occult, which I found was interesting.
Yeah.
So
I know somebody that was born with club feet, and the Shriners took care of her.
Really?
Yeah, fixed all of it.
Yeah, it's not all bad. Over the years?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it turned out we really needed the Shriners because I almost died. The numbers grown over the years. It started out 3 times or something, then it became 8 times, and it became 12 times. So I don't know how many times I actually died during that surgery, but
yeah,
it was, bottom line is the surgery got way more expensive than it was supposed to because my anesthesiologist turned out to be a dentist. So things went horribly awry.
They're synonymous now.
Yeah, well, there you go. And that was before Obamacare. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right, so let's start off with hearing old Bill Schneblin's story, and then we'll go back to one of his videos that I think I wasn't able to. I didn't confirm it, but I'm pretty sure the next video we're going to be watching is from '98. So that's one thing. Believe him or not believe him, he's been telling the same story for about 30 years at this point. So, you know, it's a point in his favor in my book anyway.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Consistency.
Yes, consistency. All right, so here we go.
In the lodge by 20 years. And this guy comes forward and he says, we're going to lead you through this oath. But it's this long, involved, and ultimately blood-curdling oath. But none of these men... Right, and he said, if you want to be a priest...
Sorry, I don't want to get hit by copyright if I can help it.
Yeah, all that music.
Yeah. That music will get us in trouble. Come on. There we go. We'll just do that.
When I got to college, and again, I wanted to be a priest. This was a minor seminary college, Loras College. At the time, it was a minor seminary. It isn't anymore. I had a priest in my theology class who had a doctorate in theology, and he was teaching a course in Christology. Because again, I was wanting to be a priest. And he took me aside, and he said, if you want to be a priest, in the Catholic Church, it's taught, sacerdotes est altus Christus, the priest is another Christ. So if you want to be like Christ, he says to me, do you want to be like Christ? And I says, well, of course. Doesn't every Christian want to be like Christ? He said, well, if you want to be like Christ, you need to do what Christ did. And again, that made sense. And again, nowadays we've kind of become suspicious about priests. But this was like 1968. And a priest was like God. I mean, whatever the priest said, that was it, And he said, well, if you want to be like Christ, you need to do what he did. And he went to the East and studied with the gurus in India. He went and studied with the lamas in Tibet. He went to
Sorry, what?
I just said allegedly.
Allegedly. Yes, allegedly.
Egypt
We're,
and studied with the magicians there. That's how he
Oh, I should also take this moment anyway. The YouTube channel is called Almost False, so they have a lot of interesting stuff. It's pretty good. It's pretty wild. Bill Schneblin actually claims that he was turned into a vampire for a little bit, so we may have to go into that at some point. It's pretty wild
super
stuff.
interesting. That might tie into our parasitic conversation later.
Maybe. Dude, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, we could have went Freemasons, vampires to parasites.
Yeah, buddy.
Hindsight's 2020, man. Anyway.
was
I
able
thought
to
COVID
do.
was in 2020.
Yes, COVID-19 in 2020, way longer than it should have. I would call that a parasite, but it was made in a lab, so anyway.
Well, allegedly. I don't think it existed.
Oh, you don't think so? Well, Tulsi Gabbard and RFK are about to come out with a bunch of docs. Apparently, they're saying Obama and Fauci kind of were a little more involved in that than previously believed. It didn't, actually, they were saying, the claim is that they're going to come out in the next couple days and say that the virus is actually created in America, then shipped to China for plausible deniability. I'll be interested to see if those documents come out.
Huh.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I think it's all they can say whatever they want about viruses. I don't think they exist. They just like say shit. So, but like I think what makes you sick is like the fear, like you know how you yawn? That's an empathic response. Like whenever you see somebody yawn, you yawn. I think whenever your body detoxes alcohol and the shit that fast food and all the shit we put in our bodies have to detox that every so often. And whenever we see each other doing that, our bodies recognize it like a yawn. And they're like, oh, I need to do that too.
Okay. Well, I mean, I certainly think there are viruses. I just think that a lot of the stuff that we've seen over the last few years has been more man-made and created by us, quote-unquote, fixing things.
Yeah.
You know, like Lyme disease, which was confirmed to be a government thing, by the way. You know?
Yeah.
So
It came from like a military island, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, but the Fed helps us because they love us. So, anyway.
I'm helping.
to raise the dead, to walk on water, to do all these miracles. So he says, what you need to do is you need to start studying the occult. And this is a priest telling me this. And so I thought, okay, now mind you, this is obviously decades before there was an internet. I mean, there was a little bookstore downtown. And I went there and I found a few scattering books on like the occult. And I found this book that was called Diary of a Witch by Sybil Leek. And she was one of the very first witches to, so to speak, come out of the broom closet. She was a British.
Her name was Sybil Leech.
I'm sure that was an alias. So
It has to be.
yeah.
Like Leech is a parasite. Sybil,
I don't know what Sybil
I'm not
means,
sure what
but
connotation that holds, but it's in Harry Potter.
yeah, I don't know who would want to name who would want a last name of Leech anyway. So I'm pretty sure that's I'm pretty sure that's an alias.
Woman, and she was a medium. And anyhow, I read the book, and she was asserting in the book that witches were not evil, that this was an ancient pagan mystery religion. Among other things, she claimed that Jesus was a witch and his 12 apostles were his coven, along with their wives, So I kind of...
In Egypt recently, I think Titus Kennedy found a cup that claimed that Christ was a magician. So it was like when... in Egypt, the stories of Christ kind of got morphed into mysticism pretty early. So, that's just something to throw out there. But anyway.
Bought into that. And I found out about this guy, Alex Sanders, who was the supposed king of the witches over in London. I sent him a letter. This is around 1968, 69. And his wife sent me back a thing. Okay, here's a coven in Rockford, Illinois, which is about 90 minutes from Dubuque. I went there and I got initiated as a witch. And then later on, I hooked up with an Alexandrian coven in Boston. and I was made a witch high priest.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you were telling me to pause. I thought you had something to say. Sorry.
No, I just did my thing that I always do constantly.
Oh, sweet.
My bad.
Oh, you're good.
Started covens in first of all in Dubuque, where I was, and then moved to Milwaukee because there was a fellow
We're gonna jump
there
ahead to
who,
degrees of
had an
Freemason.
occult.
Let me just skip ahead here. Basically, he got real heavy into the occult,
Yeah.
and then as he was messing around in the occult, they eventually told him he needed to get into Freemasonry because it was connected to the occult, and if he wanted to graduate to the next level, he had to become a Freemason. That was the claim.
Yeah.
So we'll skip ahead and go to degrees of Freemasonry.
Before we actually get to that part, I want to make sure to take some time to talk about Freemasonry, because Freemasonry, it's very rare to actually talk about to talk to former Masons, because it's something that you're not supposed to talk about. So it's kind of an opportunity while I have you here to kind of, for me,
It's like Fight Club with aprons.
Yeah, no, I think like once you get like 30, after the 33rd degree or whatever it is, or the 32nd degree, you take an oath where you say, if I tell the secrets, then you can kill me. Like it's like it's.
It's great. Yeah, it's like you get up to the 33 and they're like, surprise, our God is Satan.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
all that years of training for nothing. You worship the
Actually.
devil, chump.
Yeah. That God we were
Personally.
talking about, yeah, that's actually a demiurge.
Yeah. Whoops. So,
learn, but also for the people to kind of have a knowledge about what Freemasonry is. You said that you became a Master Mason. Can you explain how the degrees and the lodges are set up in Freemasonry so people actually understand what we're talking about?
Well, the basic thing is what's called the Blue Lodge. And that consists of 3 degrees: entered apprentice, fellow craft, and Master Mason. A lot of Masons never go any further than that. I did, but basically, it's like an initiatory process. The requirements are you have to, at that time, now mind you, I think I joined in 75. You had to be a man, freeborn, of good report, and well recommended. So they asked you if you believe in God, and I said yes, I did. And they didn't ask which God I believed in. They just, do you believe in God? And I said yes. I didn't tell them that the God I believed in had horns. So anyhow, I went through there's this whole process. You do a lot of memory work, they call it. You memorize all of these ritual things. You have a mentor who's called your poster, who's an older Mason.
okay, actually, if he's not going to go into more detail, I think I'm just going to skip ahead to the next video, which is like from 1998. And he breaks down this stuff in the more detail. Bottom line is Freemasonry is kind of tied to the occult. I thought maybe he'd go into more detail but must be later on in the video. So we'll just go to one of his earlier ones. So this is from the Prophecy Club way back when. And Hot Man a Minute on their YouTube channel produced this. Hot Man a Minute. So this is Bill. Yeah, right? So this is an old one. Here we go. We'll just go into that.
But yet most people understand that this is a secret society. And what are they keeping secret? And is this something that Christians should be involved in? Well, we're going to try and explore some of that tonight and see if we can't get to the bottom of some of these issues. First of all, let me give you the classical definition of Masonry, because the Masons obviously themselves do have a definition that they give the public for public consumption. And this is basically it. Masonry, we are told, is a system of morality, veil, and allegory. Now, doesn't that help a whole lot? We can just all go home now, you know? We all know everything we need to know about the Masons. Well, that's the way they would like it, unless, of course, you join. But actually, there's a lot more to it than that. Let me give you my definition. I define Masonry as the world's oldest secret fraternal organization, a system of 3 ritual initiations or degrees based on the medieval stonemasons guilds, guarded by blood oaths and founded on the principles of the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man. Masonry symbolism is a blend of Old Testament symbols rooted in the building of King Solomon's temple and ancient mystery religions. Now, you heard in the introduction about all these different degrees and things that I have been through, but in reality, most Masons will tell you that in fact there is only classical Blue Lodge Masonry, that is in fact the core of all Masonry. Now, Blue Lodge Masonry refers to the first foundational 3 degrees of Masonry: Entered Apprentice, Fellow Craft, and Master Mason. Now, indeed, Masonry has become universal. It's in virtually every country of the world, even now I believe in Russia. And just to illustrate this briefly, this is
Just as an aside, the King James only guys, they believe that the Freemasons had a lot to do with like the reinterpretation of the Bible. I don't know how true that is, but just to kind of show that there's this idea that the Freemasons are kind of the hands that's rocked the cradle for forever and a day.
Which reinterpretation?
Like all of them, like from
Oh.
pretty much anything after 1881, like when Westcott and Hort did their methodology of Bible translations. So
I mean, it checks out when you follow the language. I mean, if this, like, because Freemasons, all their stuff is based off, like he said, King Solomon. Solomon was into witchcraft. I mean, you got the seals of Solomon, and like, so he was into all that.
Well, that's their lore. I don't know. I think that's the important thing to point out is that's what they say. It's like part of their lore. I don't know if it's true or not. You know, who knows? Yeah. But that's kind of like their thing is they claim they're from the tradition of Solomon and stuff, which he gets into in a little bit here.
But I wanted to say, so, like, but I think the base behind witchcraft is spellcraft. Mm-hmm. Like you're making spells, right?
Yeah.
So it's words.
Yeah.
So it would make sense that they would be the ones, the hand behind changing or interpreting the translations of the Bible.
Well, I think what happened is it was a stone guild, kind of like a regular builders guild for forever. And then the Illuminati, like the guys out of the French Revolution, took it over. And then it got into like the weird cult stuff, which is all born out of the French Revolution and the cult of reason and all that stuff. Like they had this goddess of light, like enlightenment, which is probably really the devil, but you know. So anyway, Star. Yeah, that kind of stuff. And so I think it got more cultic after, was it 1789? There's a really interesting book that I haven't read, but I've been meaning to. It's called Proof of a Conspiracy. Let's see if I can actually Google it. But it's actually a book that was sent to George Washington. A conspiracy book. I'll just do Freemasonry. Because it's not going to show it to me unless I get super specific. So, oh, you little turds. This is this it? Proofs of a conspiracy against all the religions and governments of Europe. Carried on in the secret of the Freemasons.
The 4th edition, so it's been edited 4 times.
Yeah, this is a newer version, obviously. But this book, Proof of a Conspiracy, I guess it was John. I guess it was John Robinson. Let's see if this is the same guy. Come on, man. You're killing me.
Come on, man. I got hairy legs. I'm the president.
All right. I'm pretty sure this is right. Let me just Google it, make sure that I'm getting the right author. Okay, so did John Robinson send... I don't know. I'm probably missing George Washington a book called Proof, not Prof, of a Conspiracy.
Professor of a Conspiracy.
Yeah, I know.
Good dog.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah, I knew that wasn't right. Yeah, here we go. All right. So, yes, I've actually read this. So it was from George W. Snyder in 1798. He sent this book to George Washington.
Probably Rob Snyder's great grandpa.
I highly doubt it, but yeah, maybe.
Oh, Rob Snyder's based. I bet it's
He
it.
is. He is based. He is based. That's true. Okay. So this is what he wrote with regards to the letter. Sir, you will, I hope, not think it is a presumption in a stranger whose name perhaps never reached your ears to address himself to you, the commanding general of a great nation. I am a German-born and liberally educated in the city of Heidelberg. Came to this country in 1776. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Let's see. All right, here we go. It was some time since that a book fell into my hands entitled Proofs of a Conspiracy by John Robinson. Okay, so this was actually... So John Robinson did write it, but this George Snyder sent it to Washington. And the reason he sent it to Washington was because Washington had been a Freemason, but it was kind of like he had to join it to be part of the British Army. And to summarize it, he kind of thought they were lame, so he quit going. But they still kind of, but once he became president, the Freemasons were like, "Hey, he's our guy,"
That's our guy.
Yeah,
We used to be tight with him.
Yeah, and Washington's like, "Oh man," so that's why he got this book. So that's why he got this book, and let's see if we can finish this up here. It was some time since that a book fell into my hands entitled Proofs of a Conspiracy, etc. by John Robertson, which gives a full account of a society of Freemasons that distinguishes itself by the name of Illuminati. So this was a subgroup of the Freemasons, whose plan is to overturn all government and all religion, even natural, and to endeavor to eradicate every idea of a supreme being, and distinguish man from beast by his shape only. A thought suggested itself to me that some of the lodges in the United States might have caught the infection and might cooperate with the Illuminati or the Jacobin Club in France. Fauché is mentioned by Robinson as a zealous member, and who can doubt of Genet and Adet, I'm going to say Adet, even though I'm sure that's not right, have not these their confidence in this country. They use the same expressions and are generally men of no religion.
Wait, are you saying there was an Italian guy named Fauci in this letter?
It might be Fauci. I think it's French, though. I don't think it's Italian.
Yeah, they're pretty close.
Yeah, it's Fauché, because generally with French, you don't pronounce the end consonant, but I could be getting that wrong. Who knows?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no, you're good. So it was Genet, and then I'm going to say Aide or Aide? I don't know. I'm not French. So have not these their confidence in this country. And they use the same expressions and are generally men of no religion. Upon serious reflection, I was led to think that it might be within your power to prevent the horrid plan from corrupting the brethren of the English lodge over which you preside. So the Illuminati was taking over the Freemasons in France, and he was trying to get Washington to prevent them from doing that.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I never heard that story.
Yeah, it's pretty nuts, right? So
yeah.
I just gave that book to Greg to read. I haven't read it myself, but yeah, I have the book.
I mean, wouldn't you think though, like it would with a basis in nihilism, aren't you self-eradicating your group?
Yeah, I guess.
So like basically they took it over and then threw it in the trash can because they're nihilists.
Yeah, well, there's always been this kind of, I think when it comes to history, you have to understand that there were some people that were really mad that feudalism got destroyed, because the whole theological monarchy and stuff, like that was basically the way they had continued on with feudalism. And once that died and it became apparent that freedom or democracies, republics, whatever you want to call them, they were going to start becoming the popular form of government. Mm-hmm. These old aristocratic types, I think, got upset, and really
what about me?
Yeah, but what about me? Because they don't want other people to prosper. That Jones puts it really good. They just want to rule over a pile of ashes. And so it's, it doesn't matter what condition the world's in as long as they're the best.
Yeah.
And so what essentially happened is they blamed the King James Bible, or what they called the paper pope. And so there were a lot of attempts.
They're mad that there's not
Yeah.
They're mad that there's not a stand-in Jesus that's full of shit.
Yeah, because that's like how you consolidate power, right? It's like,
Yeah,
we
right.
can't control these people if they can read their own book. This is crap.
Right.
That was
Yeah.
exactly what it was. And so there were these variety of different kinds of attempts to basically undermine the King James Bible because it had brought about the Protestant Reformation. In some sense, it had brought about the Enlightenment. And ultimately, it was what killed the theocratic monarchy. So, because, there was the Great Awakening that preceded the American Revolution. That's connected to the American Revolution. And so they basically blamed the Bible for destroying the monarchy and feudalism. So what's happening is when you get to like the time of the French Revolution and kind of into the 1800s, is you get these different attempts to try to reestablish feudalism. That eventually ends up becoming communism, but, it took like 100 years for that to actually develop. But you're seeing kind of the birth of that with the Illuminati and stuff. So there's like all these varying attempts to basically destroy, Republican government. So, and the Freemasons preceded that, but yeah, the Illuminati apparently got in there and took it over, But it didn't do them a lot of good, and I don't know what's going to get covered in this video and what's not, but something happened, I don't remember which, but something happened that caused a real nasty backlash towards the Freemasons in the 1800s, at least in America. And so I think that might be one thing. Of course, I don't know how big Freemasonry stayed in Europe, but in America, it got rejected until Alfred Pike, which is much, much, much later. So, and that's when the weird occult stuff kicks in.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm ranting randomly.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's and that's kind of why people blame Freemasonry for everything, because it's kind of tied into this.
Yeah. And they got worse groups that tried to take it over and it made it look even worse.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. All right, let's see.
Fascinating.
Yeah. All right, let's see what Schneblin has to say.
Stamp that someone just gave me from New Caledonia. I'm not entirely sure where New Caledonia is, but it's evidently somewhere where they speak French. And if you look up there, you'll see that it says the 125th anniversary of the presence of Freemasonry in this country. And you'll notice many Masonic symbols on there. The one that I want to draw your attention to, though, here is the square and compasses of Masonry. And, of course, inside of it, though, instead of the usual letter G that we're accustomed to, we have a bright red pentagram. That's going to be very important later.
Ooh.
Now, what needs to be understood is that in the United States, all the Grand Lodges that function here come from the Grand Lodge of England originally. But yet, after the American Revolution, it was determined that each state would have its own autonomous Grand Lodge. So every state is more or less its own jurisdiction. And so here, for example, you would have the Grand Lodge of Indiana. Now, the fundamental structure of Freemasonry is rather complex once you get past those first 3 degrees. You'll see here that you have 2 basic stair steps once you get past the Blue Lodge, which is down here. This represents the 3 degrees I just showed you. Then beyond that, you have, this is the Scottish Rite here, and this is the York Rite over here. Those are the 2 major paths that the Mason can travel. There are 29 degrees here, and there are 9 degrees here. And then when you get to the top, you can go into what is called the 33rd degree if you're one of the lucky few that get to do that, and that is called the Grand Sovereign Inspector General degree. Additionally, Masonry has what are called auxiliary or adoptive bodies, and those are under the arch. The best known of those is the Shrine. And then you also have things like the youth orders, Desmoulins and Rainbow, Tall Cedars of Lebanon, Daughters of the Nile, and so on. And now all of these together make up what is traditionally thought to be classical American Masonry. Now, suppose you wanted to be a Mason. This is something I'm not recommending, of course, but if you do, some of you may have seen the bumper stickers that say, to be one, ask one. The tradition is that you have to ask a Mason. Masons do not do active recruiting, but yet on the other hand, they are today because frankly, Masonry is losing members fast. Now, I wish I could tell you this is because there was a mighty revival sweeping America and that Masons everywhere were just falling on their faces and repenting before God. And to a certain extent, that is happening, praise God. But I think it's more due to cable TV, a little more mundane reason. Because frankly, there are better things most people have to do today than sit in a lodge room somewhere. And unless there's some compelling either political or social or economic reason why you want to be a Mason, you're probably not going to bother with it because, quite frankly, a lot of it is rather boring. And
Okay, with that, we're going to skip ahead to, let's see, I have timestamps, but I didn't label what they were for. So let's go here.
to turn our backs on the old paganism that we used to be a part of, even if we were just regular old heathens, you know, even if you weren't part of some weird cult like I was. So what happens is that God oriented his temple the other way. And that really smote me in my heart when I read that passage. Now, let's talk about how Masonry got started. Its origins are basically shrouded in the mists of time. Masons claim that their first Mason was in fact Nimrod. Now, you know, if I was a Mason, I would not brag about the first Mason being Nimrod. But as that most people understand, he's the person that helped build the Tower of Babel, and it is from Nimrod.
Nimrod? I don't think he meant builder when he said that. So
No.
That basically
Mushroom says fungus. I don't know if he means we're high or if he likes fungus, but either way, welcome to the chat. So.
We're not there yet, but we'll get there, buddy. Hang in there. Freemasons are like fungus.
Okay, then you'll notice after that we see the Egyptian mysteries of Isis and Osiris. And then we have King Solomon and the building of his temple. And there's a character in there that's going to be very important later called Hiram the widow's son. Then in Greece, we have the rites of Eleusis. Now that was the mystery religion, the predominant mystery religion in the days of Greece. And what a mystery religion is unlike your church, okay? Your church, I'm sure anybody can walk in, right? You know, it's not like they have to have a secret handshake to get into your church, do they? If they do, you better talk to me after, okay? Anyway, on the other hand, if you were in a mystery religion, that would only be open to initiates. The best known modern example of a mystery religion other than Masonry would be Temple Mormonism. Because while anybody can walk into a Mormon church, nobody can walk into the depths of a Mormon temple unless they have a special card called a Temple Recommend. Okay, so that was a mystery religion. It involved a mystery, and you had to go through secret initiatic rites and ordeals in order to be a part of the rites of Eleusis. Then beyond that, there was a group called the Dionysian Artificers. Now, artificer is just a fancy name for builders. And these folks were architects and masons who worshiped the god Dionysus, who is the Roman, or actually the Greek god of wine and orgies. Then we have the Kabbalah, which came around about the 5th century BC. It's Jewish mysticism. And then we have Gnosticism, which is Grecian mysticism. And all of these things all contributed to what today we have in modern-day Masonry. Then during the medieval period, we have a different group that came along around the year 1000 called the Hashishim. And this was the world's first real modern-day cult, relatively speaking, and secret society. And I talk at great length about the Hashishim in my other video. I don't have time really to go into it now. Suffice it to say that the name is both where we get the word hashish and also where we get the word for assassin. If you look carefully, you can see the word assassin in there. Then after that, along came the Knights Templar. Now, the Knights Templar were a Catholic order of knighthood. And they went over to the Holy Land, and of course the Hashishim were over there in the Middle East, and so they kind of swapped initiations and information and all that, and the Knights Templar brought them back to America. About the same time that same information got into the Stonemasons Guild. And that's why today, if you look at the great cathedrals of Europe, you will see that many of those cathedrals have pagan symbols on them, even though they were built by the Roman Catholic Church. And that's because the stonemasons who built those cathedrals were actually concealing Masonic mysteries in all of those gargoyles and caryatids and demons and unicorns and everything that you see all over those cathedrals. Then finally we have the Brothers of the Rosy Cross, also known today as the Rosicrucians. They were the inheritors of the secrets of the rites of the Templars. And what's interesting is the first recorded printed use of the word Mason in the history of the English language involves the Rosicrucians. It's from a poem called Muse's Threnody, which is written by a guy named Anderson. And this is the passage. It says, "For we be brethren of the Rosy Cross, and we have the Mason word and second sight." Okay, now.
All right, so on that pleasant note, we're going to move on to why the Masons were so popular. The short answer is networking. But I wanted to, we're going to stay here for a few minutes because there's actually a very interesting theory he has about how far the networking would go. So I wanted to explore that.
Yeah. Most of you
do not
contemporary.
Give me a, all right.
Let's say your boss is a Mason. Let's say that you're up for a promotion and the guy that's competing with you for that promotion is a Freemason. Who do you think is going to get that job? I'll give you a clue, it ain't going to be you. Another thing that Masons do is they use the lodge to network. And this is especially the case with doctors and lawyers. Because doctors and lawyers, it used to be, their codes of ethics would not allow them to advertise. I know all of you are probably sick of seeing commercials for lawyers now. But, you know, back in my day, when I was, say, maybe 20, 25 years old, lawyers were not allowed to advertise. And so the only way they could advertise was through the lodge or through similar fraternal organizations. They would develop networks, and that's how they would get referrals. So then we have the whole thing of discounts. I've already alluded to that, for example, you can walk into a store, and if you're a Mason, you say certain little funny words, and they'll give you a discount. And then, of course, the question becomes, how many large corporations are being run today by Masons? Many, many of them. Just one example. How many of you know that Dave Thomas, the guy that owns Wendy's, he's a 33rd degree Mason? Might want to rethink where you buy your hamburgers. Anyway, and it's a shame because I always kind of like that guy. Anyhow, then we've got the
You didn't miss much except the guy who started Wendy's, Dave Thompson. He was a Freemason apparently. So just to ruin somebody's day. I can't hear you.
My bad. So you know how Wendy's has square burgers?
Yeah.
Squaring the circle?
Illuminati confirmed.
Uh-huh.
lodge and the law. This is even getting more sinister here, folks. Because of what I just mentioned, this whole issue of how lawyers used to build clients, there's always been a close association between the lodge and the law. Large numbers of lawyers and judges are Masons. In fact, in the old days, almost all lawyers were Masons. That's a little bit less true today, but especially obviously if you're a female lawyer, you're not a Mason. But many judges and many lawyers are Masons. Additionally, throughout Europe and America, a disproportionate number of law enforcement people are Masons. In London, it was essentially required that one be a Mason to advance in Scotland Yard of the Metropolitan Police. Untold hundreds of sheriffs in this country and police chiefs are Masons. J. Edgar Hoover, for example, was a 33rd degree Mason. This left a solid Masonic stamp on the FBI, which persists to this day. Now, all of this sounds only vaguely disturbing, but for one thing, and that is the content of the oaths that are given in Masonry. For example, when you take the third degree oath of a Master Mason, one of the codicils in that oath says that you will warn a brother Master Mason of approaching danger so that he can get out of the way. Now let's say you're in the prosecuting attorney's office, or let's say you're a police officer, and you learn that a brother Master Mason is going to have a warrant served on him for his arrest. You're obligated by an oath to go and warn that Mason so he can skip town before he's thrown in the clink. Another thing is that you will notice in the third-degree oath that you swear that you will keep the secrets of a master Mason inviolate within your heart, murder and treason excepted. That means any crime except murder and treason, you are obligated by that blood oath to cover. If he's a rapist, if he's a child molester, if he's a thief, if he's an arsonist, any of that stuff, you have to conceal that. You are not allowed to talk about that. And that's true even if you're an officer of the court. Now it gets even worse. Let's say you're a 7th degree Royal Arch Mason in New York Rite. Then the oath is that you have to keep the secrets of a Royal Arch companion inviolate within your heart, murder and treason not accepted. In other words, you've got to keep everything secret. That guy could be an axe murderer. He could be a traitor to the United States like the esteemed Mason Benedict Arnold was. And the Masons would not be able to reveal that. This is pretty serious stuff. Now, let me give you a couple of examples of this. In many communities, especially in the South, try to bring a case against a Mason. You will not get very far, even in the so-called Bible Belt. True story, the boys and the juvenile court judge. There was a juvenile court judge in the Pacific Northwest who had a predilection for little boys. And basically, he presided over a lot of these juvenile delinquent type hearings, and many times, if he liked the boy would get off in exchange for meeting with the judge in chambers and exchanging certain favors, shall we say. Well, this fellow, they kept trying to bust him, and because he was surrounded by Masons, both in the courts and in the law enforcement, they would always cover up for him. Finally, one of the boys went and tattled to the newspaper, and fortunately, the fellow who was the reporter was not a Mason. The story got out. The fellow apparently killed himself, but broken rocks were found in his pocket. Talk more about those broken rocks later. Another true story. There was a financial scam artist in London, and basically he was bilking all sorts of people out of money. And there was a Scotland Yard officer who was trying to nail this guy, and they couldn't get him, and they couldn't get him because the Masons in the yard and the Masons that were surrounding him were protecting him. Finally, the guy did manage to find enough evidence to convict the fellow, but guess what happened to the Scotland Yard official? He was almost busted the meter maid. And they kept giving him the worst possible assignments, and finally the fellow actually had to resign. Then there's the case of the woman who was married to a Shriner. It was his second marriage. He was considerably older than she. She was a young, attractive woman. And he was a member of a very elite shrine organization called the Jesters. Now, if you know anybody who's a jester, be afraid. These are very creepy people. And what would happen in this particular woman's case, and I know it's not isolated because of some of the documents I have seen, every Friday night they would have poker. And he would tie his wife up on the bed, and all the other jesters would rape her. And there was nothing she could do about it. She went to the local police chief, and he was a Shriner. She went to the district attorney, and he was a Shriner. And finally, she was about to go higher than that, and a psychiatrist came to her and said, if you say one more word, we're going to have you locked up as a paranoid delusional because I'm also a Mason. And you'll be locked up forever on my signature, and you'll never get out. She ended up having to flee the state. These are examples of how Masons can cause a miscarriage of justice. But here is probably the most celebrated example of this in the history of the West. Jack the Ripper, a Freemason? The answer to that question is yes, one way or another. Let me explain. For those of you that may not know, Jack the Ripper is probably
there's a story
the
coming
Western
for
world's
that.
first known serial killer. He murdered 8 prostitutes in Whitechapel district of London in the year 1888, and he had the whole city of London terrified. This was Victorian England, mind you, and nothing like this had ever happened in the history of England that anybody knew of. And here's what happened. They mounted a huge investigation. The man in charge of the investigation was Police Commissioner Warren, who was a Freemason. At that time, the Prime Minister of England, as is often the case, was a Freemason. The heir presumptive to the throne of England, the Duke of Clarence, was also a Mason. and the physician to the royal court at the time, Dr. Gull, was a Freemason. Now, here's what actually happened. The 8 women who were killed, if you study this, and I happen to have been, before I even became a Mason, I was kind of a Jack the Ripper buff. I'd read several of the books about him and kind of studied up. And when I became a Mason, I realized that the horrible way these unfortunate women were murdered was in accord with Masonic ritual gestures. Just one of them had her throat cut from ear to ear, another one had her bowels ripped out of her body and thrown over her left shoulder, and so on and so on. These were Masonic ritual murders. But why? Well, here's what happened. Believe it or not, the Duke of Clarence, who was second in line to the throne of England, had fallen in love with a prostitute named Annie Crooks. And he married this woman. Now, that was bad enough. But he had a child by her, a little girl. And this woman, horror of horrors, was a Roman Catholic. Now, if you understand the way the Parliament and the monarchy work in England, there is a law that no member of the royal family can ever marry a Roman Catholic because of the adversarial relationship that existed for centuries between the Church of Rome and the Church of England. And so this was this would have shaken the very
Romeo and
foundations
Juliet.
of the throne of England.
Yeah.
So Dr. Gull, who was a physician and surgeon, had Annie Crooks committed to a mental institution where she died by suicide several months later, because of course in those days mental hospitals were not really Club Med, not that they are today either. The little girl, who was 2 or 3 at most, was placed in a Catholic orphanage. But every woman in Whitechapel, from Catherine Beddoes to Mary Jane Kelly, that knew of the wedding and knew Annie Crooks, were horribly murdered to conceal the secrets of a brother master Mason. Now, you'll notice the thing.
So, there's that story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a mess.
So
I got to give you one here. So going over the oaths.
Yeah.
I got to give you one. Your boy Paul.
Go
He
for
said
it.
to never take oaths.
I believe Christ said the same thing. Oaths are not a good thing.
Based.
Yep. So we're going to call it good there. I had 3 other sound bites, but I think we'll go ahead and pause on that because we're about 50 minutes in. If you all are interested in this topic and you'd like us to go over it further, because we've just scratched the surface, this is a rabbit hole.
No, just barely.
Yeah, so if you guys want us to go over it further, let us know. And if it bored the snot out of you, let us know and we won't talk about it again.
If it bored the snot out of you, then you're not here.
Yeah, then you're not here. So I guess we don't worry about it. No, I mean, I guess the point is, it's like, it's when they talk about this conspiracy theory stuff, it's really just good old boys clubs. It's networking.
Yeah.
People in fraternities and these kinds of, I knew Sister's Bob's cousin and he's part of this club or whatever. And that's what pushes a lot of this stuff. And that's basically what's going on here, only, mix a little bit of the occult in and you've got it. I think next time, if we do go over this again, we'll talk about Alfred Pike, because Alfred Pike, he was the guy that started a lot of the occult stuff in Freemasonry. Yeah, he actually gave it a revival in the late 1800s because, the American population rejected it for a time. Yeah. And then, Alfred Pike brought it back. So we might go over that.
Should tie in with like pre-FBI, CIA kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Because the KKK, Albert Pike was the
he also founded
wizard
the
of the KKK.
Yeah,
so
he was a Freemason.
That's a CIA program. So
is it a CIA program? I didn't know that.
I believe so. I mean, it's like the same kind of people,
Yeah, like the Fed
carpetbaggers and the CIA is like the same thing.
Well, we'll look into that next time. I think that'd be interesting. So, Alfred Pike is apparently a notorious dude. So I learned in this research. So
I feel like Joe Biden said something about liking him.
I think it was Bird. It was Bird, the guy that was a Grand Wizard of the KKK,
you're right.
and it's something Bird. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm wrong.
So that's all right. But point is, fraternities are not a good thing.
No, sir.
didn't like him in college, and apparently people don't want to leave college any more than want to leave high school, I guess. I don't
Right.
know.
Everybody just wants to be the specialist boy in the group.
Yeah, pretty much.
You know?
All right, well, we're going to move on. This is going to be the end of episode 1. So if you are watching on the live stream, stay tuned. We got episode 2 coming up. And if you're watching this after the fact, guys, thank you so much for watching. And we'll see you next time. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Faith, Fiction, and Folklore. If you did, we would love it if you would subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Rumble. We can also be found on X, Instagram, and Facebook. And we are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio. Thank you again very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.